I've been using the ASUS 480Hz OLED monitor every single day for 1 year. Competitive games, single player, editing and streaming. I've tested every setting and dealt with every quirk this monitor has. So in this video I'm going to show you what actually matters after 1 year. What works, what doesn't, and whether $1200 is a justified investment or just a marketing trap. Starting with understanding why this monitor feels like a shortcut to better aim. Now before I made the jump to OLED, I spent 2 years on an Acer 390Hz TN panel. For competitive gaming it was solid, it was fast, and the motion clarity was decent for the time. But TN panels have a wall you eventually hit. The colors are dull, and every game feels like it has like a faded grey film over it. I even tried the 360Hz IPS panel from Alienware, but the motion blur made it unusable for high level play. So I was stuck choosing between a fast ugly screen or a pretty slow one. Then I saw the early reviews for the 480Hz OLED monitor, promising a zero motion blur and actual color accuracy. And then I realized I might be playing on an outdated tech. However, there's a massive side effect to this speed that almost made me think the monitor was broken the first time I loaded into a match. Now I bought this monitor for tactical shooters, CS, Valorant, Apex and maybe Siege. When you first switch to OLED it feels weird. On every other monitor you are kinda used to a little bit of motion blur. It's what makes a game look like a video game in the first place. On this OLED that blur is almost gone. When you move to the left and to the right the image stays perfectly sharp. It feels dry and almost too real. At first it's actually a bit hard to get used to it because your brain expects that slight ghosting. It feels non-gaming, almost like looking at a moving photograph. But of course once you spend a week with it and your eyes adjust, you realize you're seeing more information than anybody else on the server. And once you stop obsessing over the motion, you realize that the speed is only a fraction of what you're actually getting for your money. Now most people focus only on the speed, but you're actually getting 4 massive upgrades at once. First, the 480Hz refresh rate makes your tracking feel much more natural. Second, you move from 24 inches to 26 inches. And in some games you might also get like some more peripheral awareness with that. Third is the resolution, you move from 1080p to 2K. And of course finally the color. On OLED pixels turn off completely. The blacks are perfect and the contrast makes the image pop so hard it almost looks like some 3D image. But of course all that beauty comes with a hidden tax. A daily technical headache that most reviewers are too scared to talk about. And I'm talking about the alt-tab nightmare and the bugs. Now this is the tax that I mentioned. To push 480Hz at 2K resolution, the monitor uses something called DSC or display stream compression. This causes a slow digital handshake between your PC and the monitor every time you switch windows. On a normal monitor, alt-tabbing is like almost instant. On this OLED, you're staring at a black screen for 5 to 10 seconds. And if you're like me and use a capture card for streaming, the delay is even worse. And on top of that, the ASUS software is mega buggy. Many options randomly disappear and won't come back until you restart the monitor. So in order to deal with all of these problems and the alt-tabbing hell, I've switched to full screen window mode in most of my games. It's a compromise most competitive players hate, but is one I'm willing to make because of how this monitor handles everything outside of a competitive server. Now the biggest surprise for me wasn't in tactical shooter, it was in everything else. Games like Elden Ring, Battlefield or Ark Raiders look like remastered version of themselves on this monitor. On a 1080p TN panel, these games look flat and mud. On this OLED at 2K, the depth and the contrast change the entire experience. If you edit video or images, you can finally trust your eyes. In my opinion, a TN panel is mega bad when it comes to color grading. What you see on the screen never really matches with what you see on your phone or on a TV. And if you wanna do like YouTube videos, that's kinda important. But that workspace value doesn't really matter if the screen literally burns itself out in 6 months. Which brings us to the biggest fear every OLED owner has. Everyone worries about the burn-in. After a full year of heavy use, my panel is still perfect basically. Zero marks, zero dead pixels, and the monitor is very aggressive about maintenance. It nags you every single day to run a 6-minute pixel cleaning cycle if it's been on for too long. Now myself I only run it like 3 times this year, and as long as you don't leave like a static image on the screen for 20 hours a day, the risk is much lower than the internet makes it seem. However, there are also some other settings that you might want to avoid. Now ELMB or extreme low motion blur is a trap, to be honest. It locks your refresh rate to 240Hz and dims the screen a lot. Now if you can hit like 400 FPS plus, native 480Hz is much cleaner than any blur reduction trick. But if you can't really get to that FPS, I think ELMB is a decent option. And I also stay away from HDR on this panel. It feels buggy and sometimes makes the image look washed out or dim, especially in games. Now avoiding this trap is easy once you know they're there, but that still leaves the ultimate question. So after 1 year, is it worth $1200? Well, if you're happy with your current setup and the money is an issue, the answer is no. You don't need this to be a good player, you don't need this to see better things in games basically. But if you want the absolute peak of motion clarity and an image that makes every other display look outdated, this is the endgame. The software has bugs, the alt-tabbing is mega slow, and the price is stupid high. high. But the reality is that once you get used to 480Hz on an OLED, everything else, TN, IPS, whatever you want, looks broken. Now, for me, despite the quirks, I'm never really going back.